A British prince can be the son of the king, fifth in line to the throne, a veteran of 2 tours in Afghanistan, and still return to the country of his birth without the automatic police protection he once took for granted. That alone would be extraordinary. But something even stranger has happened, because after years of legal battles, private negotiations, public accusations, and failed attempts at reconciliation, Prince Harry has once again forced the royal family to confront a question it has never truly resolved. What happens when a man leaves the monarchy but still expects Britain to protect him like a prince? And this time, the most important person in the story may not be King Charles, it may be Prince William. Because while Charles has shown signs that the door to his younger son is not completely closed, William appears to have reached a very different conclusion. There has been no dramatic televised declaration, no angry speech from Kensington Palace, no public ultimatum. Something quieter has happened. The distance has remained, the boundaries have remained. And after Harry's latest push involving his family, his safety, and his ability to return to Britain, one possibility is becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. William may have drawn the line. But the real reason behind that line goes much deeper than security. And before this story is over, we are going to return to one extraordinary detail from Harry's latest British visit, because it reveals how differently the king and his heir may now see the future of this family. To understand why this matters, forget the headlines for a moment. Forget Montecito. Forget memoirs, interviews, Netflix documentaries, and palace briefings. Go back to something much simpler. 2 boys walking behind their mother's coffin. For decades, the story of William and Harry was built around the assumption that whatever happened around them, the brothers understood one another in a way nobody else possibly could. They had grown up inside the same strange machine. They knew the photographers waiting outside palace gates. They knew the pressure of being watched while still children. And in 1997, they knew what it meant to lose Diana while the entire world watched them grieve. That shared trauma did not merely connect them. It became part of their public identity. William was the older brother, more cautious, more controlled, the future king. Harry was the younger one, more spontaneous, more openly rebellious, the spare. Different personalities, same battlefield. For years, that difference almost seemed useful. Harry could do what William could not. William could carry the burden Harry would never have to carry. And then the system that had once kept them together began pulling them apart. By the time Harry and Meghan stepped back from royal duties in 2020, the disagreement was no longer simply between 2 brothers. It had become a disagreement over what being royal actually meant. Harry wanted distance from the institution, but there was one part of royal life he could never simply leave behind: risk. When Harry and Meghan ceased being working members of the royal family, the security framework surrounding them changed. In 2020, the body responsible for protection arrangements, RAVEC, decided that Harry would no longer receive the same degree of publicly funded police protection when visiting Britain. Harry challenged those arrangements through the courts. In 2025, the Court of Appeal rejected his challenge. Legally, that appeared to settle one question. Emotionally, it settled nothing. Because Harry's argument was never merely that he wanted bodyguards. His argument was that his status had changed, but the threats surrounding him had not disappeared, and that distinction would eventually become explosive. Harry had served in Afghanistan, his military record was public, his marriage had generated enormous international attention, his children were grandchildren of the British monarch. From Harry's perspective, stepping away from royal work did not magically turn those realities off. From the institutional perspective, however, something equally important had changed. He was no longer carrying out official duties on behalf of the crown. That created a contradiction with no easy solution. If Harry was entitled to the same security simply because he had been born a prince, then how much of royal privilege could someone retain after voluntarily leaving royal service? But if the protection disappeared because he stopped working for the institution, what happened if the threat against him remained? That was the first major fracture in the story. Then came something far more personal. Harry began saying that the security situation affected whether he could safely bring Meghan, Archie, and Lilibet to Britain. Suddenly, this was no longer simply about police officers. It was about grandchildren. It was about King Charles seeing Harry's children. It was about whether Archie and Lilibet would grow up knowing Britain as part of their identity or as a distant country connected to photographs of relatives they barely knew. And that placed Charles in an almost impossible position, because Charles was not only the king, he was also their grandfather. But then the situation changed again. In the summer of 2026, Harry was preparing to return to Britain in connection with events surrounding the Invictus Games in Birmingham. He wanted his family to be able to come too. His representative said he was exploring every available option to make a family visit possible, and stressed that the central issue was not simply where they would sleep, but what they regarded as appropriate protection throughout the visit. Reports at the time said a request for taxpayer-funded police protection had been rejected. And then came a remarkable new detail. A security assessment commissioned by Harry's own private security company reportedly identified multiple extremist threats and described his risk in Britain as elevated compared with the United States. Among the materials cited were threats connected to extremist groups and Harry's military service. That assessment was not the same thing as an official British government threat evaluation, but emotionally, its effect was obvious. Harry was no longer asking the public to imagine a vague danger. His side was presenting specific threats. Suddenly, the argument became much harder to dismiss as a simple dispute over privilege. If Harry genuinely believed his family could be targeted, what father would knowingly place his children in that situation? But there was another side of the question. Who decides what level of protection is justified? Harry, the king, William, or professional security officials? That distinction matters enormously, because despite years of royal intrigue surrounding this case, protective security decisions are not simply handed down personally by the monarch. The system exists precisely because national security cannot be treated like a family favor. And this is where William enters the story in a very different way. Not necessarily by intervening, but perhaps by refusing to. For years, speculation has suggested that reconciliation between Harry and the royal family requires one dramatic meeting, one conversation, one apology, one Christmas at Sandringham, one photograph of the brothers walking together again. But royal relationships do not operate that simply anymore. William is no longer just Harry's older brother. He is Prince of Wales. He is the man preparing to become king. Every dispute he encounters now has two dimensions. The personal question is, what does William feel about his brother? The institutional question is, what precedent would the future king be creating? Those are not always the same thing. Imagine the problem from William's position. Harry and Meghan left royal duties. They built an independent life in America. They publicly discussed private royal conversations. Harry described family conflicts in interviews and then in his memoir. And yet the door to Britain could never completely close because Harry remained the king's son. So where does family end and monarchy begin? Where does compassion end and precedent begin? And how many exceptions can the institution make before an exception becomes an expectation? That may be the real line William is facing. Not simply whether Harry should visit Britain, but whether leaving royal service can ever mean leaving the responsibilities of the system while retaining access to its protections whenever desired. However, that was not the biggest surprise, because Charles appeared willing to separate the relationship with his son from the institutional dispute surrounding him. During the controversy over Harry's summer visit, Buckingham Palace sources indicated that royal accommodation had been offered. For a moment, this seemed like a breakthrough. A secure royal residence could provide privacy. It could allow Harry to remain within the royal environment. Perhaps most importantly, it could create the conditions for father and son to meet without the circus of hotel entrances, photographers, and public speculation. Then everything became confused. Harry reportedly declined the accommodation before later trying to accept it. By that point, palace officials said the necessary arrangements could no longer be made. Harry stayed elsewhere. The episode lasted only days. But symbolically, it captured the entire relationship. An offer, a hesitation, a reversal, a missed deadline, another opportunity lost, and still the question remained. Could Charles and Harry somehow rebuild their relationship, even if William wanted nothing to do with the process? Then came the moment few expected. Harry returned to Britain. And the story did not end with airport photographs or another angry statement. Reports confirmed that Harry, Meghan, and their children were later received privately by King Charles and Queen Camilla at Highgrove. No official family photograph was released. No dramatic palace video appeared. The meeting was treated as exactly what both sides claimed they wanted it to be. Private, family, quiet. Think about what that means. After years in which security had supposedly made a meaningful family visit extraordinarily difficult, it happened. The grandchildren saw their grandfather. Harry entered the king's private world again. Meghan was there. The children were there. And yet one person remained conspicuously absent from the picture: William. This changes the entire dynamic, because until that moment, it was possible to imagine the royal family and Harry as standing on opposite sides of a single locked door. But that is no longer an accurate picture. Charles appears capable of maintaining some form of personal relationship with his younger son. William does not appear to be moving at the same speed. Recent reporting has described the relationship between the brothers as essentially frozen, with no meaningful contact and little evidence of movement from William's side. And that creates a situation the monarchy has rarely faced. The king may want a relationship with Harry, the future king may not. So what happens when father and heir see the same family crisis differently? That question matters, because Charles can make decisions as a father that William may eventually inherit as a king. Charles can invite his grandchildren into his home. He can speak privately with Harry. He can attempt reconciliation. But William is thinking about a monarchy that may one day be his responsibility. And the future matters. Every photograph, every visit, every invitation, every security dispute, every private conversation that might later become public. From William's perspective, trust may now matter more than affection, because affection can survive betrayal. Institutions cannot survive without boundaries. And there is another layer to this that makes the conflict even more painful. Diana. Security is not an abstract subject to either brother. Their mother died in Paris while being pursued by photographers. For William and Harry, discussions about paparazzi, protection, and family safety carry memories almost nobody else in the world can fully understand. Harry has repeatedly framed his concern for Meghan and his children through the shadow of what happened to Diana. William also grew up with that shadow, but the brothers appear to have reached radically different conclusions about what those memories demand from them. Harry's response has often been to fight. Fight newspapers, fight institutions, fight security decisions, fight publicly if necessary. William's response has largely been control. Control access, control exposure, protect the children through carefully managed appearances, keep family life contained, keep institutional disputes institutional. Two sons shaped by the same tragedy. Two completely different survival strategies. And now, those strategies are colliding. Harry appears to believe that protecting his family requires challenging a system he believes has failed to understand the risk around him. William may believe protecting his family and the monarchy requires preventing personal relationships from overriding established boundaries. Neither interpretation requires either brother to be a villain. That is precisely why the conflict is so difficult. But then another uncomfortable question appears. If Charles successfully reconnects with Harry, what happens when William becomes king? That is where this story stops being gossip, because every royal reconciliation happening today exists beneath an unavoidable countdown. Charles is the monarch now, William is next. Harry is the king's son now. One day, barring an extraordinary change in the line of succession, he will be the king's brother. Those are very different relationships. Charles may feel a paternal responsibility that William simply does not share. And that means the long-term future of Harry's relationship with the monarchy could depend less on what Charles decides today than on whether William ever changes his mind. This is why the security dispute matters far beyond police escorts. It has become a proxy battle over belonging. What does Harry still belong to? The family? Certainly. The institution? Not in the way he once did. Britain, emotionally, historically, and constitutionally, yes. But what privileges should accompany that connection? That is where every answer becomes dangerous. Give Harry too much, critics argue, and the distinction between working royal and private citizen becomes blurred. Give him too little, his supporters argue, and Britain risks making the king's own son feel unsafe returning to his country with his children. And while everyone argues over the technical details, something much simpler is happening in the background. Archie and Lilibet are growing up. Every year that passes is a year they spend largely outside the ordinary rhythm of royal family life. Christmases pass, birthdays pass, Balmoral summers pass, cousins grow older. George, Charlotte, and Louis are living one version of royal childhood in Britain. Archie and Lilibet are living another thousands of miles away. The consequences of this feud are becoming generational. That may be the highest stake of all. Because William and Harry are no longer merely fighting over what happened between them, their decisions are shaping how their children know one another. And this is where the phrase "William draws the line" becomes more complicated than a headline. There is no confirmed public statement from William declaring that Harry cannot return. There is no evidence William personally controls Harry's police protection. There is no official proclamation banning reconciliation. The line is quieter than that. It is visible in the absence of movement. Charles met Harry, William did not. Charles appears willing to preserve a channel, William's remains closed. And sometimes the most powerful royal statement is the statement nobody makes. Silence becomes policy. Distance becomes structure. Nothing happens. And because nothing happens, everyone eventually understands where the boundary is. But what happens next could make the current dispute look small. The Invictus Games are due to return to Birmingham. Harry's connection to Britain is therefore not disappearing. There will be future visits, future negotiations, future security assessments, future questions about Meghan, future questions about Archie and Lilibet. And eventually, there may be another moment when Charles wants the entire family together. That is when the real test arrives. Because William may be able to avoid Harry during separate engagements. He may be able to maintain distance while their father meets his grandchildren privately. But a major royal family occasion would force a different decision. A Christmas gathering, a milestone birthday, a national ceremony, a funeral, or one day a change of reign. At some point, separation becomes impossible to manage through diaries. And then William will face the question that has been quietly approaching for years. Can he forgive Harry without restoring trust? Can he accept his brother into the family without bringing him back toward the institution? Can Harry return to royal spaces without expecting royal status? And can two men who experience the same tragedy ever accept that it changed them in opposite directions? Because beneath the security officers, the court cases, the palace briefings, and the newspaper headlines, that remains the real mystery. Two boys once believed the other was the only person who truly understood. Today, they can inhabit the same small country and remain worlds apart. Harry's latest demand may concern safety, Charles may see grandchildren, officials may debate risk, lawyers may debate procedure, but William's decision is ultimately about something no committee can calculate: trust. And trust has no security assessment, no court can order it, no king can command it, no palace can manufacture it. That is why this story has not ended. Harry can win another invitation. He can return to Britain. He can walk through another royal doorway. He can sit privately with his father. But there is one door that remains closed, the one leading back to the brother who once walked beside him behind Diana. And until that door moves even slightly, every royal reunion will contain the same empty space. Charles may still be trying to preserve a family. Harry may still be trying to return safely to the country that made him a prince. But William is preparing for something larger than either of them, a monarchy he will eventually have to protect himself. And perhaps that is why the line has finally become so clear. Not because William stopped having a brother, but because the future king may have decided that being brothers is no longer enough.